Yo, what is going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you the best perks you should be looking out for while you're leveling and gearing your character all the way up to 700 and then going into 725. So the best perks you should be looking out for armor is going to be health and elemental aversion. These two perks are absolutely insane in both PvE and PvP. Health is just a universally good perk. It makes you tankier in every situation, so it just allows you to have extra survivability, always coming in useful. And then elemental aversion, receive 4.5% less damage from range elemental attack. For PvP, this is insanely good because most ranged weapons in PvP do elemental damage. Fire staff, life staff, ice gauntlet, void gauntlet, all these are elemental. Musket is generally majority elemental. Bow, if you run the artifact bow, this is elemental, so it helps you against basically almost all the range weapons, giving you a lot of extra tankiness in PvP. For PvP, it's really strong because if we go to one of the dungeons down here, and when it's mutated, enemies deal 50% of their damage as void damage, which is an elemental damage. So while you're in a dungeon, this also makes you extremely tanky. Now for the new raid, I don't know how they're going to set it up, but for doing mutated dungeons, this perk right here, elemental aversion, makes you extremely tanky as well. Another great perk you should be looking out for if you're in heavy armor, especially if you're in heavy armor, is shirking fortification. After dodging an attack, gain fortify, increasing your armor by 4.7% for 4 seconds. This is really strong actually while you're in heavy. In medium, it's not that good, and in light, it's terrible. Never run this on light. In medium, I don't think you should run it either. It's generally just a heavy armor build perk. Another great perk to look to run is refreshing. This isn't good on every build, but on a lot of builds, this can be extremely useful, especially healer builds. Refreshing reduces your max cooldown by 4%, stacking up to 4 times. You get 16% total CDR reduction from running this perk. One of the best PvP perks is shirking heals. PvP only, dodging an attack heals you over 250 health and 1.5% of your max health. You can put this on all your armor pieces. This does proc only every 7 seconds, but this is a massive heal. Another good perk here is Enchanted Ward, 4% less damage from light and heavy attacks. This works for both PvE and PvP. I don't think this is as good as elemental or health, so this is like definitely lower on the priority list. This is a really good solid option if you roll gear with this. All right, next I want to talk about conditioning perks. Slash conditioning here, 5% slash damage after you've taken slash damage. There's a variant for this perk pretty much for every type of damage in the game, like thrust, strike, fire, ice, void, all that stuff. Generally, the ones I would try and focus on would be thrust, slash, and fire for PvP. For PvE, this isn't really a good perk in general because it's too situational, but for PvP, this can be pretty good, especially if you're in medium to heavy equipment loads. Getting a slash conditioning, thrust conditioning, or fire conditioning perk on your armor, it can definitely come in clutch. They do stack, so I can have multiple pieces of slash conditioning here on all my pieces, up to 25%. Next, I want to talk about freedom. Freedom is okay. It's not too bad. It reduces the slow stuns and roots by 12%. You can stack this up to 4 times. The reason why this isn't as good as it used to be is because you can go to your attributes here and see when I have 300 dex, I cleanse all stun, roots, and crowd control status effects as a 30-second cooldown. So a lot of builds can actually just get away without using this perk here. Freedom, they can just go over to their attributes, get 300 dex, swap their weapons, and cleanse the root or the stun. Another thing to look out for is harnessing here. As you can see, nature harnessing plus 2% for nature damage. Ice harnessing here plus 2% ice damage. This is really good if you're running like a pure fire damage build, like if you're running fire staff rapier, that'll be all fire. Then having fire harnessing on that build would be very good, but it's very situational. But it's a really good perk if your build does primarily one sort of damage. Now, there is no physical variant of harnessing, so you won't get slash, strike, or thrust damage. It's only elemental damage for the harnessing perk, so do keep that in mind. Something to actually avoid is physical aversion. I don't think this perk is very good at all, since most of the range attacks, like I mentioned earlier, are always almost all elemental. I would try and avoid physical aversion as well. Another perk you should look to grab is shirking energy. If you avoid a hit while in light equipment load, you gain 15 stamina. Has a 6-second cooldown. This is really strong. There should be a variant for this in each equipment load, one for medium, one for light, and one for heavy. You only should have one of these on your armor, by the way. It's super strong, so I recommend running it. They're adding a couple new perks. I'll show them on screen here, which ones you should be running. Hasted Vigor is super good actually, and I highly recommend running this, especially in PvP. What it does is potency of incoming damage over time effects are reduced by % per armor piece. The best part of this is after taking a hit while inflicted with a dot, you gain 10% haste for 5 seconds. This is super good because in PvP you will always have a dot on you. You'll basically getting 10% haste for free. Absolutely run away from everyone. Another perk that I think will be good next patch is taking a critical hit will reflect nature damage back at the target equal to 7% of your weapon damage and reduce the attacker's crit chance by 10%. I think this one could be useful as well, having one of these on your armor. Other things you can put on your armor are your weapon perks, such as Mending Protection here for Life Staff, Fortify Sacred Ground for Life Staff. So just look for the weapon that you're using and look what perks you should be running. Put those on your armor. Next, I want to talk about jewelry. Jewelry being our amulet, our ring, and our earring. For your amulet here, Divines and Healthies are always a safe bet. This is because you'll be getting healed a lot in PvE from the healer, and in PvP generally a lot as well if you have a lifesteal build. First I want to talk about Divines. Divine increases your 10% health from all incoming healing effects. This doesn't include potions, by the way, healing from other players, and lifesteal. This is a very solid perk to have, and if you get it, it's very good. Health is always a safe perk to have as well because it just makes you overall tanky, allowing you to basically just survive longer because you have more max health. Same with Divine, you survive longer. Next, you have the protection perks. Slash protection, fire protection. There'll always be one protection per source of damage. Here's fire and here's ice. These perks are really good if you're doing a mutated dungeon. Otherwise, I would avoid these. So generally what you would do if you're running like an M3 and you're trying to get your gear up to 700, having one of these on you is very useful. If I can get into this dungeon right here, you see this says void damage. If I'm doing a void damage dungeon, I want to take a void amulet with me. If you're doing an M3, I recommend having 40% resistance of the element. So down here, as you can see all my element damage resist. And I recommend having 40% of, like if I was going to do that dungeon I just mentioned earlier, I would want 40% void damage to comfortably do that dungeon at the highest level. So Pristine Horn here, as you can see, when you hit below 50% health, gain 50 to 100 stamina. This is getting nerfed, so I don't recommend running this too much anymore. It's getting a pretty hard nerf. I'll show that on screen. It's still a solid option, but there definitely is better options. One of them being Purify here is also pretty good. When you're hit below 50% health, you lose all your debuffs. This is especially useful in the Fire Staff meta since Fire Staff stacks an insane amount of dots on you, and it can definitely chunk your health away extremely quickly. So Purify can definitely come in clutch. Another good perk to run on your amulet is when you get hit below 50% HP, you reset all your active ability cooldowns. This is extremely strong and probably one of the best perks for next patch. Onto the ring here. The ring, you always want Hardy. What Hardy does, it increases your max stamina by 10%. Now, it may not sound like a lot, but it's actually a big deal. As you can see here, I can roll 3 times right away. But if I take off this ring, I'm only going to be able to roll twice. In a panic, when you need to roll 3 times to get away or to break a lot of distance, the Hardy can definitely come in clutch and save your life. Next up is slash damage. Now you should run whatever damage your build primarily uses. So if I'm Fire Staff, it's fire damage. If I'm sword, like I am right now, it's slash damage. Sword and shield and Greatsword both use a lot of slash damage, so slash damage is extremely useful. So this is just kind of build dependent. Whatever your build primarily does, you want to put the damage right there. Another amazing perk to have is Bloodletting. Bloodletting increases the bleed you apply lasts longer by 29%. This is extremely strong on Rapier bleed builds for PvE, especially if you're running the finisher. This will give you a lot of extra DPS. The same perk can be applied for the Fire Staff here. Base duration of your burns lasts 32% longer, allowing your Fire Staff to do actually a lot more damage as well. So I highly recommend picking this up if you're running the Fire Staff build. Burning perk is super broken on it. Another really good perk is actually Leeching. Heals for 7.1% of the damage you deal. Does not trigger off dots, so if you're running a dot heavy focus build, Leeching is not super good. But if you're not running a dot build at whatsoever, Leeching is extremely broken on some setups, giving you a lot of extra survivability. And then for healers, you want Healing Breeze and Sacred. These 2 perks are a must on your ring, but these are just for healers, and Refreshing can be good. And then onto your earring. Your earring, Healthy Toast, Regenerating, and Refreshing Toast, in my opinion, are best for your earring. Healthy Toast, when you drink a mana potion, you gain 15% of your base health. So if you have like 150 con to 200 con, this will heal you quite a bit. And since your mana potions are only on a 15-second cooldown, This is actually a lot of healing, and this can stack up extremely quickly. Refreshing Toast, consumable cooldowns are 10% faster. Very good, synergizes well with Healthy Toast. Consumables are being regeneration potions, health potions, mana potions here, and then regenerating 0.5% of your health every second. This scales really heavily if you're in a long fight. As long as you're not dying in the first 10 to 15 seconds, regenerating will an extraordinarily amount of healing, allowing you to survive where you wouldn't be able to if you were not running regenerating. There are some other perks that you can run. Nimble is another nice option. I know a lot of people like Nimble. I don't like Nimble. I personally prefer regenerating because they can't be together. Nimble or regenerating conflicts each other, so you have to pick one. Fortifying Toast is actually pretty good as well if you are on a heavy armor build. If you are running heavy, Fortifying Toast is actually extremely good. But if you're on light, it's pretty much useless. Same with medium. I wouldn't get it with medium either. But if you are running heavy, Fortified Toast, actually another very good option. All right, next I wanted to discuss some weapons that you could farm, starting off with the flail. We have the Befoul Flail, the Barbarian. It has refreshing move and accelerating barrage. After hitting an enemy, you gain some nice haste here, but the main one is refreshing move here. This helps you. Aggressive flail. You do have to farm this in Tempest Heart M3. Another flail that's pretty good on the offensive would be the Life Ring Flail. It has Blessed and Life Stealing, and you get to choose your third perk here. And they can drop here in Eden Grove, the Malevolence. So what you do is there should be a shrine right here. You go to the shrine, walk all the way over here, and it's kind of like a wave thing. You have the next flail will be the Taya Flail. Refreshing move, good for healing, mortal power, kind of useless. You do get to pick the random perk. As you can hear on the map, you can farm doing elites, or you can farm it up here as well in this area. Generally, some really good perks, or Enchant is always a nice option. Keen is fine, Vicious is fine, Blessed is good as well. It allows you to heal more while you're on the flail, and then a weapon perk is always nice to have as well. I'd recommend farming for one of the artifact flails. These are a lot better. The Power Stone, the new flail, is actually, I think, extremely strong for PvP. If their health is above 90%, you weaken them by 20% for 5 seconds. This is huge in PvP, and it has some really good perks, refreshing move, and enchanted, and you can choose the third perk. The Odo can also be good. This deals more damage to stun or knock down foes. I just think Power Stone will be a lot better for PvP. But the Odo can be pretty good for PvE. It's definitely the better option for PvE. It has Odo Defense here, Life Stealing, and Refreshing Move as well. Refreshing Move is very good. When you get this is you have to farm the Vanish here in the elite area. So you have to, there's a shrine here on the map. You have to run all the way through here to the end of the dungeon and farm the final boss. Next off, let's discuss the Greatsword. Bark Bite here is a nice option to get. It has Life Stealing, which is always nice, and crit chance. You go to this little arena, you have to have like a key to enter, and you'll farm this boss over and over again if you want to grab this weapon. Next up, we have the Corrupted Greatsword. This has Trenchant Strikes, an amazing Greatsword perk. Very good for high DPS. Shrinking Abyss, a nice perk as well for PvP. For PvE, this is pretty useless. Where you get this is farming enemies in Shattered Mountain. Enemies in Shattered. Tangle Vine Greatsword. This has Trenchant Recoveries. This is the sustained version, and crit chance. Trenchant Recoveries is extremely nice. It heals you for 25% of the damage dealt by heavy melee attacks. And since you heavy a lot on the Greatsword, this is massive for sustain. You get this through farming enemies in the Elysian Wild. You can farm it from this guy over here. There'll be a bunch of spots. The perk you usually want to get on the Greatsword, depending on the thing, but Life Stealing is amazing. If you like running Crosscut, Leeching Crosscut's an amazing ability to put on your weapon. This thing is an absolute monster if you're a fan of Crosscut and PvE. Relentless Freedom is also not bad to run as well, since it gives you 20% crit chance. Keenly Jagged is also an extremely good option if you don't have it on your other weapon. And Keenly Jagged is a big boost to DPS. You should always try and get the artifact, the Serenity. The Grace is more of a movement variant. I definitely think the Serenity is the better version of the two artifact Greatswords. You get this through doing the PvP track, through arenas, OPRs, and whatnot to unlock that. And then what you want to put actually on this one is the gem slot. For the Fire Staff, the Syncretic Fire Staff is a really good choice. It has Keenly Jagged, an extremely strong dot, and Enchanted. Light and heavy attacks deal 5% additional damage. You light and heavy a lot on the Fire Staff, so it has really good synergy. For this third perk, you can lift up a Keen or Vicious on the Fire Staff, or you would put an Attunement. You would avoid Fireball. They nerf Fireball pretty hard, so Fireball is no longer a good option. From the town out here, run over here, and then in this little area, there's like 4 or 5 enemies you can kill for all Syncretic gear. Next up, you have the Corrupted Fire Staff here. This you swap out Enchanted for Keen, so it's another really good option. Both these Fire Staffs are really good, and I recommend farming either of them if you want. For the third perk here, you could put Enchanted, Vicious. You find this in Shattered Mountain. You just click on one of these guys, and I'll tell you all the enemies that will drop. Next up, we have the Artifact for the Fire Staff. Very, very good. It's getting buffed. I highly recommend grabbing this if you are going to be a Fire Staff player. This is going to be one of the best artifacts in the next patch. What this basically does is you deal 15% increased damage to a target within 15 meters. Extremely good. Keenly Empower, gain 10% Empower for 5 seconds on critical hit. 10-second cooldown, you'll be proccing this all the time. Vicious, 7% crit damage. Very, very good. And then for your last perk here, Keen is a good option. Getting a Shirking is not a bad option either. A Dungeon, a Mutation. It's dropped from the final boss in the mutation in Imperium Forge. Next, we have the Syncretic Musket. This is pretty much BIS. If there's one weapon I recommend farming, it is this one. This is pretty much what you're always going to be running if you're a Musket player, no matter what. There is no really good artifact for Musket. So the Syncretic Musket is a must-have if you're a Musket player. You just put Enchanted, Vicious, or Keen on it. I recommend Enchanted. Most of your damage comes from your light attacks on the Musket. It'll be like 3 or 4 guys you can farm. Next up, we have the bow. Same for the Musket. Pretty much best in slot bow right here. Highly recommend getting this. It has Keenly Jagged and Enchanted. The third perk, you would try and get Attunement on it. I don't know why it doesn't show, but you can put Attunement on it. Or you could put a weapon perk if you want, but I recommend putting Attunement. This is, once again, BIS for PvP. Very good for PvE as well. And you would just farm it once again right here in this little area. Artifact for the bow, it is definitely good. I recommend running the Rapier artifact if you are going to run bow, but it changes the damage to lightning. So this is basically only for PvP you would run this. For PvE you would run the Rapier. Always over the Bolt Caster for PvE. You deal 20% more damage for lightning. This is really good because most people don't have lightning resist for PvP unless they're running Elemental Aversion generally. For the last perk here, you would just put the gem slot. The way you get the artifact bow is by going to the Elysian Wilds and farming the guy on top of this rock. This is his name. Next up, we have the hammers. Now, there is a couple variants for the hammers. This depending on the way you want to play the game. Vicious and Trenchant Recovery. This is more for your Sustain Hammer playstyle. Heals for 25% of the damage dealt by heavy attacks. The Spore stuff, generally, I like to farm the guys in here for my Spore stuff. Next, we have the Tangle Vine Warhammer. This is the higher DPS version, because now it heavy melee attacks deal 23% damage. This is more for DPS. We'll do a lot more damage with this setup. It also drops in the Elysian Wild, as you can see here. You just click on one of the enemies, and it just shows you where you can kill them. Next, we have the Corrupted Progenitor Warhammer. Trenchant Strike's heavy attacks deal 23% damage. This is a good mixture of both weapons. The random perk that you want to be selecting for the Great Hammer would either be Attunement. Shirking is fine for PvP, or you always can run Keen. Keen is really good, or you, depending on your hammer build, you could put a weapon perk here as well. The way you farm this guy will be a Shatter Mountain farm in this little cave again. Next, we have the artifact for the hammer. Heal. This is basically just a pure life stealing. Heal for 25% against knockdown people. Heal for 25% of the damage dealt by heavy attack. Heal, and you also get life stealing on top of this. But the way you get this one is by farming the boss in Hive of Gordons, the new dungeon. That has to be 725 gear square, I assume, to farm this efficiently. Next, we have Great Axes. This would be your more PvE focused Great Axe. The Taya Great Axe. So you just click on one of the Ebon Scale monsters. Next up, we have the Life Ring Great Axe, the higher damage variant of the other, between the two Great Axes. Great Axe perks that you would want to be running here will generally just be Life Stealing, Keenly Jagged if you don't have that on one of your weapons. You generally always want Keenly Jagged on at least one weapon. Life Stealing is not bad. Refreshing Move if you want. You can run Attunement, Shirking. Enfeeling Maelstrom is also pretty good as well. Reduces attack damage by 17% for 8 seconds. Pretty good in PvP and PvE. It saves roll gravity well. This is pretty much BIS for wars. Next, we have the Abyss. This is pretty fun in Great Axe. It's generally paired with the Fire Staff. So Fire Staff Great Axe is actually an extremely good build. But you have to use the Abyss or the Fire Staff that I showed earlier to run Great Axe Fire Staff. The major corrupted portals in general, the 65 plus ones, you have to farm the big 65 plus portals, open the box, and have a chance to get this Great Axe right here. Next up, we have Life Ring Spear. Keenly Jagged with Vicious, extremely good. This is another really high value spear I recommend getting. This is one of the better ones to farm out of all the other weapons. You can put Enfeebling Skewer on the weapon here. Skewer supply and 50% weaken for 8 seconds. This is beautiful for PvE and PvP. Or you can put Keen for more damage, but Enfeebling Skewer is so good, man. I recommend getting this. Scorpion Sting is a pretty good artifact. What you do is, now when you throw Javelin, you yoink him over, like, get over here. It can be pretty frustrating to play against as well, since sometimes you get pulled into a massive clump and your health bar just disappears. The way you get it is by going to Brimstone Stands, coming up here to this little shrine. I do believe you have to be nighttime for this. There'll be a scorpion here that spawns only during night. I'm pretty sure that's how you have to get the weapon. It's this is definitely super heavily on heavy attacking to make this weapon useful, so it's way more situational than the Scorpion Sting. You have to start from here, travel all the way up through like this, and there'll be an arena here where you have to enter in a key and you'll have to fight her in this arena. Next we have the Hatchet. The Sporelight Hatchet, to be precise, has crit damage and refreshing move. Pretty good for PvE. You can put Keen on this bad boy, Attunement. Keen Berserker is pretty good as well. Refreshing Torrent is not a bad weapon perk either to grab for PvE. I believe it's only dropped in this area right here, this elite zone. I recommend farming the end of the zone. Syncretic Hatchet. This would be better for PvE, for more damage. Rogue is kind of got an indirect nerf through the target lock system, since you'll be able to backstab players nearly as easily, since when you target lock, you basically turn around in an instant. You farm it right here. There'll be like 4 enemies in here. Next up, let's go for the artifact for the Hatchet. Sin, I won't be talking about this one. This one's ass. Don't even worry about this one. Debuffs last 20% longer. Deal 2% more damage per debuff on the target. Max 5, so extremely strong Hatchet for the artifact here if you like stacking debuffs and being a little rat. You can put either a weapon perk here or a gem slot, like Keen Vicious or like Keen Berserk, something like that. This is Brimstone Stands, by the way, between Shattered. There'll be a shrine around here you can run to. This is a pretty confusing POI. It's not like linear. You have to like run up some weird wall here, like scale the walls here like a mountain, and then run to the specific location. All right, for Rapiers, we have the Sporelight Rapier. Crit damage and life stealing, very nice. Keen, omnidirectional evade's a pretty good weapon perk. Leeching Flurry, if you are a Flurry enjoyer, this is massive for extra sustain and PvE. Deadly Flourish is not bad either. Shirking, Attunement, all those perks are fantastic in this area right here. Then you have the Curatin Rapier. This has Rogue, once again, like I mentioned earlier. Rogue kind of got an indirect nerf from PvP, but in PvE it's still pretty good. And this can still definitely work in PvP as well. Keenly Jagged, very strong perk. You only want one of these on your weapons. I should really stress that. You can grab this right in here. This is an elite zone, so keep that in mind. But the main one you want to be looking for is the Finisher. One of the best artifacts, hands down, the entire game. Attacks against bleeding targets deal 15% more damage and reduce Flourish cooldown by 5%. You get Deadly Flourish, 41% more base damage, and Keen Tondo, 20. This is an illegal weapon perk combo, by the way. You go to your slot here, you can go Keen Vicious. These are both super good. I'd recommend Vicious. Keen Speed if you want some more mobility. Keenly Empowered's not bad. Keenly Jagged if you don't have a form of bleeding. Life Stealing, there's so many good perks you can put on this weapon. Rogue if you're more PvE focused. Enchanted's not a bad option as well. I definitely recommend grabbing this weapon as soon as humanly possible. There won't be a guy here. You'll have to kill 3 baby mammoths around this area. Once they're all dead, the mama will spawn in this corner. You have to kill the mama. I recommend a group for this one as well. Pretty hard to farm solo if you don't have Blood Drinker. Next up, we have the Taya Longsword. This is pretty good for PvE. Refreshing move, light and heavy attacks reduce your cooldowns, allowing you to taunt more efficiently. And heavy attacks, melee rends for 7 seconds. Pretty good at rending bosses, so you find this in Ebon Scale Reach in the elite zone here. The Life Ring Longsword, a more damage focus, has Vicious and Enchanted. Perks you can want to be grabbing are Upheaval perk here is actually pretty good, I think. It'll increase Upheaval's damage by 20%. Now, Upheaval seems like it's going to be incredibly broken next patch. And Stone and Shields is the best weapon in the entire game, so other perks, Keen's always a solid option. Keen Speed from extra mobility, Keenly Jagged if you don't have Jagged on one of your weapons, Life Stealing for some extra sustain. You can also run the Butcher if you want to run the artifact. If you're in PvE, you also generally run the Shield for the artifact. For PvP, you usually run the other weapon for the artifact. But this makes your bleeds last longer. William Blade inflicts bleed damage, dealing 10% weapon damage for 6 seconds. It's not bad. You would put the gem slot here as well, generally, or you would put Keen Vicious again. You have to farm this in the dungeon in Ebonscale. I can't remember the dungeon, I'm so sorry. But there's a dungeon right on this dock. Be a way shrine, I think, down here. You run over to the dock and then to the dungeon here, and the dungeon will teleport you across, and then you have to go all the way through the entire dungeon and kill the final boss. Has damage reduction, refreshing. You receive 10 less stamina damage while blocking, a must-have for a shield. For the perks I recommend getting is Fortifying Shield Rush. This is one of the best abilities in the game. When you hit a shield, you gain Fortify, increase your armor by 35% for 6 seconds. Absolutely massive. I recommend avoiding the wards here, so they won't be consistent for your dungeon. Or you can put Sturdy Energy while blocking a hit below 30% stamina. Gain 42% stamina regeneration for 6 seconds. Where you farm this is in Eden Grove here. Gotta kill him. Or you can farm wherever this tells you, like here is fine. Soul Shroud, Round Shield. This is if you are mainly for only PvP. 5% base damage, crit chance, Kindling Empowered, extremely good perks. And then your final perk here, I'd recommend either getting Enchanted, Vicious, or a Fortifying Shield Rush is just too good, man. You could also grab Accelerated Resolve, another really good perk. You could even get Sturdy, I guess, if you want some more blocking stability. Shattered Mountains through the elite area, so over here. I recommend farming the priests up here. They'll be like big dudes in white coats. The wall, this is mainly for tanking. Gain 5% base damage, reduction. You cannot dodge, but 33% more stamina. You take 25% less damage from all elemental sources. Insanely good M3s. Sturdy, really good perk. Keen, you gain 10% fortify for 3 seconds on critical hit. Really good as well for tanking. And then the perk, you definitely want to get Fortifying Shield Rush. If you want to know where you grab this bad boy, you need to get it in a mutation. In Need, one of the harder early game dungeons. It drops from the final boss right here. Next up, we have the Blunderbuss, Deep Priver Blunderbuss. This has Kindling Empowered and Enchanted. To be honest, there's not really too many good Blunderbusses to farm. This is just the best one I could find. Keen's not bad. Shirking or Attunement is not bad as well. Or you can put a weapon perk on here. This whole elite area will drop from enemies in here. The Pestilence, a really good artifact, especially for PvP. This basically reduces incoming healing by 5% and outgoing by 2.5% per stack. 3. This is humongous for stopping healers from healing people. You also get Pest, deal 8% more damage against poison and disease target. Played crits, critical strikes against targets, inflict disease for 6 seconds, reducing healing effectiveness on the target by 26% and outgoing healing by 13%. This is basically just a healer killer. You would either put a weapon perk or a gem slot on this bad boy. I believe that it's from getting the PvP rewards. 50,000 as assault, so make sure you're saving up. It unlocks on PvP track 29. High Void Gauntlet. This is more for the damage variant. This is Refreshing Move and Enchanted. What would you put on this? Well, you put Keen, or you put Petrifying Scream here. Is pretty good. It reduces incoming healing by 43% and outgoing healing by 21%. Absolutely stopping those pesky healers. Shirking or Attunement as well would be amazing. You get this in the POIs and Evans, or up here is really good. I recommend farming up here. Next up, we have the healer one. This has Blessed and Refreshing Move. This is more if you want to be a healer. If you're being a healer, Petrifying Scream is still really good because you need this in dungeons. Refreshing Rupture is another good weapon perk to have. You can drop it in here. Next up, we have the Life Taker. This is generally what you will run if you're in a dungeon. If you're running Life Staff Void Gauntlet, you usually take the Life Taker so you can do extra damage. While you're on Life Staff, the Life Staff artifact's not very good. But this is also very good for PvP as well. It has your range attacks Disintegrate for 8 seconds on both weapons, 1 second cooldown. If your dexterity attribute is higher, replace your base weapon. So some people actually like to run bow and musket. Some people like to actually run musket with this, or bow with this. It's actually pretty strong. Crit damage, life stealing, and refreshing move. You put the gem slot generally here. You have to farm it in the Elysian Wilds, so you'll have to spawn the wasteland here, run up the mountain like this, cross the bridge here, and then run around until you get to this eventual rock. This is the guy you have to kill. Abyss for Ice Gauntlet, really strong, has Kingly Dagger, Vicious, 2 amazing perks. Keen, super good. Put a weapon perk on here. Some of the weapon perks are absolutely a monster. Healing Tomb, 33% healing of your base health, super strong in PvP. Ice Spike can be really 40% more damage to rooted foes. This is mainly for PvP, but Keen's really strong as well. PvE, I recommend grabbing the Deep Freeze here. Shield enemies, root, and shield take 15% additional damage, is both good actually in PvP and PvE. Vicious, refreshing move, nice perks to have as well. You would put Keen once again, or an ice perk, or one of the perks on there, shirking or attunement. Where do you get this? You get it in Glacial Tarnus by killing this boss right here. Next up we have Life Staff, Life Channeler here, Bless, Refreshing Divine Embrace. I really like this on the Life Staff, super good for healing. Third perk, Purifying Breeze is good, or the other perk I would grab is Refreshing Move. Light and heavy attacks reduce your active cooldown by 2.5%. Only problem that this one is relatively hard to farm because you have to kill this boss in Genesis right here. Farm is the Corrupted Life Staff. It has Blessed and Refreshing Move, two really good perks. You would generally put Purifying Breeze is good to put on it, or Refreshing Divine Embrace is really strong as well. Shattered Mountain, farming the enemies, so I want to quickly discuss on how to get 725 gear scores, since the gear I mentioned earlier can't hit 725, only 700 excluding the artifacts. The main four ways are the PvP island, doing the Sandworm raid, doing the Hive of Gorgon, the new raid, or crafting it. These are the four main ways that we know of how to get 725 gear score. I will leave a link to this website in the description if you want to check it out yourself, or if you want to farm a certain weapon. This website will tell you how to do it. If you guys did enjoy the video, it would mean a lot to me. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll be streaming on Twitch.